Yeah, we're live. You're listening to Restore the Republic, the voice of the people who's had enough. Enough of the corrupt judges, enough of the rogue cops, enough of the lawyers who twist the law and politicians who trample it. This is the show that dares to ask the question, what happened to our de jure American government and how do we get it back? I'm your host, Sheriff Andrew Ike on the unincorporated Richland County, Ohio, and every week we expose the lies and decode the legal traps that empower you to reclaim what's rightfully yours. No fluff, no compromise, just fact. With me, as always, Sheriff Adam Bonner, unincorporated Summit County, Ohio. How's it going, Adam?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing good, doing good. We got a good one today. We're gonna call it saltwater sovereignty. If all the state nationals know what that refers to, it should be a good one. How maritime law took the land. How the maritime law got onto our land jurisdiction. Today, we're going to dive into the most controversial legal theory in America, that the laws of the sea have quietly taken control of our land. We'll explore how this alleged jurisdictional hijack happened and who's behind it and what we can do to reclaim our rights. Before you can understand how the sea may have crept onto the land, we need to understand what the sea actually governs. Let's start with the basics. What is maritime law and why does it matter, Adam?
Well, maritime law and admiralty law, like a definition of that would be a specialized body of law governing nautical issues and private maritime disputes. So the scope would include shipping lanes, navigation, waterside commerce, salvage, and marine insurance. Jurisdiction traditionally applies to events and contracts that occur on navigable waters. So when you think of maritime law as the rule book for ships, sailors, and sea-based commerce, it's not supposed to govern your backyard barbecue or your mortgage.
Yeah.
As you get into land jurisdiction and common law, the definition for that would be a lawful framework governing people and property on land, rooted in constitutional and natural law. Scope would include criminal law, property rights, contracts, torts, civil liberties. Jurisdiction would apply to its state citizens, and I guess we could include residents, even though the Residency Act is kind of going over into their statutory backyard.
Yeah.
But as long as we're within our nation's borders, land law is what most Americans think they live under. Laws passed by elected officials, enforced by local courts, and protected by the Constitution. We know that not to be correct. That's kind of why we're here, educating. So special maritime jurisdiction, that's what you're going to find yourself in. I guess a definition for that would be like a hybrid legal zone where maritime law is applied in land-based situations through legal presumptions and assumptions and administrative procedures. Controversy would be critics argue this jurisdiction is unlawfully imposed on civilians or Americans, unbeknownst to them, that are unlawfully converted into 14th Amendment U.S. citizens. So these are deceptive legal constructs. This special jurisdiction is a legal Trojan horse, bringing sea law ashore, inland piracy, without your consent. So that's kind of my spiel.
That's it. I think a lot of people are, I don't know if they're aware of it, because the jurisdictional thing is not everybody's getting into it. We just know that you go into these, I've been saying it forever, the sea jurisdiction courts, and you can't find remedy there, and we're starting to understand why, because it's not for us. It's not for living men and women.
Yeah, the administrative tribunals that they're calling courts, they deal with legal fiction laws. They deal with corporate entities. We'll call it that, even though we know they're legal fictions or public usufruct things that are not living men and women. So again, it goes back to that whole thing that we were talking about. If the straw man trust or estate doesn't exist, then why do they want to lie about this and hide it from the public's eyes.
Yeah. It's
Because
real.
that's what we're talking about.
We know it.
Right.
Well, anyways, the origins of admiralty law in America, the British Admiralty courts, that started over in Britain, used to enforce the trade on and taxation in the colonies. When it came over to the state, well, over to the colonies, that's what they were using. And in the post-revolution shift, the U.S. Constitution granted federal courts the authority over admiralty cases, but only within the proper bounds, and I think here, I don't know, it could have been the last 20, 30, 40 years, they have overstepped them bounds, and it's just getting worse. It's getting to where they're not even recognizing the land jurisdiction, or living men and women. It's kind of weird. Well, the founders knew the dangers of the unchecked maritime power, That's why they limited it to the actual maritime cases. Just, the stuff that went on in the sea, that's what they wanted to limit it to. But, the alleged expansion that we want to talk about, what's that all about?
Well, I guess the alleged expansion, after the Civil War and emergency powers, I don't believe that that is for us, but yeah, the Civil War and emergency powers, we claim the emergency powers and bankruptcy declarations allowed maritime law to seep into domestic governance, which it did, and it should have never happened that way. Federal agencies and subcontractors. So I guess we argue that U.S. agencies, U.S. agencies are not sovereign entities, but corporate subcontractors operating under maritime rules. So it's not just about ships anymore at this point, because piracy has come inland ashore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got roadside piracy. Everybody knows about that.
Right. So this becomes about your birth certificate, your taxes, and your court appearances. These may all be governed by the international sea law, or law of the sea.
Yeah.
In case you guys don't know, or you just are now getting on, that would be, the dead jurisdiction, where you're lost and dead at sea.
Yeah, the dead entities.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? There was a mechanism of creep here. They were creeping into this, Now we understand what maritime jurisdiction is. Let's explore how it allegedly made landfall quietly, systematically, and without your consent. It's probably the major thing right there. No one consented to this crap. When you see them gold fringe flags, often cited as a symbol of admiralty jurisdiction, we claim these flags indicate a military or maritime court, not a constitutional one. And I think everybody's starting to realize that, and a lot of people are picking up on, they see the gold fringe flags all over the place, Critics argue that they're ceremonial, and but sovereign advocates see it as a jurisdictional marker. Now, if it's ceremonial, why would it just be in the average courtroom? What do they celebrate? What kind of ceremony they got going on? It's kind of bunk, really. But the legal language and presumptions, terms like person, citizen, resident, we've went over those before. You can look at them in the Black's Law dictionaries. You can look them at in the Bouvier's Law Dictionary. And they all mean different things. We went over this. A person is basically a corporation. Citizen, same thing. Resident, you only have the ability to reside. You went over the Residency Act before. They're all allegedly used to define corporate entities, and not living people.
Right.
So presumed consent, by not rebutting these things, when you go into these sea jurisdiction courts and they call you a resident, or they ask if you're a resident or a citizen, if you don't rebut them, individuals are said to tacitly accept the maritime jurisdiction. So right off the bat, the people that really don't understand what's going on, as a living man or woman going into a C jurisdiction court, and they call you a resident of this town or a resident of the county, and you say yes, they got you. They just got you and grabbed you into their maritime jurisdiction. And
Well, I mean, it's all based off of deception because you didn't get full disclosure of their rules, the little word salad games that they play to claim that they're obtaining personal or subject matter jurisdiction. Because, from my research, they not only do they have the obligation and the responsibility to recuse themselves and to turn over the jurisdiction back to the Supreme Court of the United States that has original jurisdiction pertaining to Americans, which they never do. That's stuff that's in the Constitution. There's certain sections in there where it says that it's their duty and obligation, and if they fail to do that, anything further, I don't want to get too far off track.
Well, hey, you were talking about the Supreme Court. Now, that isn't even our Supreme Court, is it?
This would be going back to when the original Constitution was written. That's what I'm referring to. So I guess that would fall under what's the Superior Court in D.C. They have a special, I guess, thing through treaties and agreements that would allow people to bring common law claims against other people, not citizens against citizens, U.S. citizens or what have you. But, of course, they've been out of that practice for a long time, and I don't even know if anybody's bringing cases there for that. But, I just thought I'd put it out there. That is a historical fact. You can go find it.
Well, if they even ran cases like that through there, I'm sure no media would pick it up. It wouldn't be put out anywhere. Nobody would know about it.
You're not going to find stuff like that on Google. I'm not going to have arguments with these legal scholars, and these attorneys in the comments saying all their weird stuff, because until AI is jailbroke or until Google and all these search engines are jailbroke to actually share the undeniable truth and facts, there's no argument.
Yeah.
And Google's not the answer anyways. You got to read books. The internet's not going to tell you anything.
You have to read. That's the hook there. Well, anyways, while you're in these courts, in these C jurisdiction courts, and they're asking you if you're a resident, this and that, and you tacitly agree to it by not saying anything, or not answering or answering the wrong way, they got you in their jurisdiction, and you're not John Smith, the upper and lowercase name who you write your autograph with or anything that represents you. That's not who you are. You're John Smith, the all caps name. In that jurisdiction, you're all the caps name. You're the legal fiction. And the legal fiction floats in the Admiralty waters, because that's what this is all about. Contract law, corporations, dead entities, and, birth certificates and corporate personhood. We argue that birth certificates create a corporate entity tied to the U.S. government. The straw man that is subject to maritime law, while living beings remain unaware. Your birth certificate isn't just a record, it's a registration. It's a registration for like ships, not people. We talk about that a lot too. Even on your birth certificate, you'll find a QSIP number, which pretty much is a bond number. They're trading that thing, trading it for money.
Want me to say something to kind of, so these attorneys are operating at law because, they're at bay of whatever vessel they're operating from. Okay, so they're up on some vessel out of the water. You're supposed to be down in the water. So if you notice when you go into a courtroom, you're kind of standing out there in the gallery with the podium. It's like they don't allow you to bring a flotation device in. Those of you who know, when you cross the bar, you're basically opening the floodgates, and your ass is grass at that point in time, unless if you declare all of your rights and reserve all of them and ask them if they comprehend or understand before you cross. And then usually after that, they think they got unlimited attempts to play the word salad game and get you to say something. Like I said, there's no full disclosure of how they're operating.
I know, Adam, you know what? We talk about this all the time, and you see it. I know we've all seen it. Everybody in the chat's seen it. YouTube videos of people, men and women, trying to go into these sea jurisdiction courts. And, with their studies and with their knowledge, they're trying to get through some of this jurisdictional stuff. And it's almost impossible, It's just,
Well,
they get you so many different ways coming and going. And that's why I've always said, and I say it again, these courts are not for men and women. We're not going to find our remedy there. We have to assemble, change your status, and get our courts running.
you can challenge jurisdiction before, during, or after the case. So I'm just putting that out there. Yeah, I mean, dude, man, these guys in the comments they're on it tonight. Excellent job, guys. Welcome.
Yeah. So, Adam, how about the federal rules of civil procedure?
I have a
Be
theory.
familiar with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it tonight, but yeah, we talk about this stuff all the time. You know how I'm always talking about, they don't have criminal. It's really just civil equity. And they don't follow the federal guidelines or, the FRCP as it is. But, again, it goes back to knowing who you are and knowing a little bit about how they're operating or what to expect. And, they're always switching the rules. So anyhow, the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, allegedly modeled on British equity law, which blends commercial and maritime principles. So critics claim these rules allow administrative courts to bypass constitutional protections. Ding. And so when courts operate under administrative codes instead of a constitutional law, the sea has truly come ashore in land piracy. There be pirates, matey. So the U.S. government is not the original sovereign entity. It's a corporation acting as a subcontractor, foreign subcontractor agent.
We've said that over and over and over.
It's in my vocabulary, so it's not. Once you know and you've seen it, you can't unsee it at that point. So anyhow, agencies like the IRS, the FBI, the DOJ, they're all allegedly private entities enforcing maritime law under contract. So they have contracts to provide services. They're governmental contract service providers. We need everybody to comprehend that that's not technically fulfilling, these vacated positions. They're still vacated. We're here to reclaim them. But the issue is they're in some type of commercial capacity sitting in the buildings that we pay for. That's the issue. Yeah. And they just don't know law and history because they're still operating internationally from that sea jurisdiction.
Adam, real quick, another thing that's been kind of bugging me, and I'm trying to get on it. I'm trying to do some studying that, like the IRS and FBI, DOJ, these three-letter acronyms, ever since the Chevron case was overturned and ever since West Virginia versus EPA, yeah. These guys don't have a leg to stand on. And how in the hell is this shit still going on?
People don't know. They don't read because that is what their whole strategy was from the get-go. Because think about it like this. Social media, for instance, various platforms are technically a psyop because all they do is take away your energy, your resources, your time. Some things are entertaining, such as cable TV. Music, all of the entertainment industry is set up a way to take your attention off of what you should be paying attention to, which is how to self-govern, how to not be involved in all these tacit agreements, to know when a revolt should happen because of tyranny, like we're witnessing I've witnessed it my whole life. But, there comes a time when you got to draw a line in the sand. You got to get out there and start interfacing and saying, I'm over here. This is where I'm operating. You stay over there. That's your side of the fence. This is my side of the fence. You don't mess with my people. And I don't come into your jurisdiction unless if I absolutely have to nab one of your people. And that should be the agreement. But
yeah, what? Number one, they got to know that we have superior concurrent general jurisdiction. We went over that before. that we don't want to go into your jurisdiction, but we can at any time and any point, but we'll remain peaceful. But we're only going in there for a specific reason.
Absolutely. And that's the hard part to get through, because there's been so many years of usurpation, so many years of abuse and corruption and politics and you name it, collaborative agreements out the wazoo that nullify oaths and FARAs that nullify oaths. And we're just sitting here like, that's great. Yeah, I would be pissed off to be a U.S. citizen. I'm glad I'm not over on that side of the fence. And I'm over here doing my thing. Just let me be. I got a job to do, just like they have a job to do. That's the medium. That right there is where we meet in the middle. And there shouldn't be any of this nonsense where ego or, perceived authority or jurisdiction comes into play, because they're all operating commercially, and we've already rebutted all of those assumptions and presumptions. Yeah. So, we're not corporate security guards enforcing statutes, acts, and codes against code breakers.
I know we went over that before. We've done episodes about it. These constitutional sheriffs, enforcing statutes and codes when you just made an oath to the Constitution.
And then they do the FARA right after, which nullifies.
We're on the borderline of treason. I don't know if these guys are understanding that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the people in the chat just posted something that basically says what you said, maritime crimes.
Well, what's wild is when you get a chance to talk to FBI agents or DOJ people or IRS, and they don't know this, I mean, how do you get it through their head? I don't know if they are uneducated or the education they get is just so specific they can't see what's going on.
Yeah, some of the feds I've met, they're very intelligent. The field agents are very intelligent, but the problem is it's in what pertains to their statutory or commercial realm. It doesn't pertain to, our American government's history. And they don't even fathom that. I don't know what they're teaching at Quantico these days. I don't, you know what I mean?
It's not American history. I know that.
It's really not. So it's just one of those things where, we're not the only ones experiencing this phenomenon. It's happening across the world, and people are waking up, and we're here trying to offer amnesty and interface. And I know people are going, well, what the heck are these guys talking about? They're offering us amnesty. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but law is actually really harsh, but it's the law. It's not the statute. It's not the code. It's not the ordinance. The law will hang you. It will kill you. And that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, I know we're here to, we're here to get along. I want to get along with these guys. I want to help them out. At some point, any one of us, the soil jurisdiction sheriffs, we can call upon the LEOs to help us out. They're pretty much required to. I don't think they know that. But
right.
we might need their help too. So it's not the point of we're against them.
Not at all.
I'm with them. We're here for the same thing. They just have to comprehend what's going on here and how you have to treat men and women. And it's not like freaking vessels that we're talking about.
Right. I look to have open and ongoing relationships with them. I mean, we don't have to have a ton of collaborative agreements, but we are going to have to at some point give directives, and you guys stay over there. As long as we can meet in the middle, that we both have jobs to do, and that all of their statutory stuff that they're required to do, we're not required to do. We don't have to do OPADAs. We don't have to do basic pistol, although a lot of us are well beyond that type of training. We don't have to go to your police academies, although some of us may or may not have, or maybe we've gone to fire academies. Either way, we don't have to have that to operate over here on the land and soil jurisdiction or the national jurisdiction. So it is what it is. I mean, I just suggest people start, looking at American law and procedure and looking at our American history. And none of this crap happened before 1913, before, the elite bankers took out some other people that were in opposition to, their New World Order plan, which essentially converted us all into federal U.S. citizens at one point.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, I want to say, closing out that last, on the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, that's not your government. Those are service providers, and you're basically the unwitting customer, unbeknownst to you. Emergency powers and bankruptcy. I mean, we could talk about that all day. I mean, we claim that since the Civil War, the U.S. has operated under emergency powers, in bankruptcy law. Have you ever noticed that every 2 years we're going into some type of war to where they can keep this maritime emergency going on globally?
Yeah.
Whoever they do business with, especially here. And then as you do research, you'll find out that everything that's on your city council or commissioner's books has to do with some emergency, because the piggies need to eat, right? So they need more of your money, you as the consumer, the taxpayer, and they're there to crack a whip to get their fiat currency.
Yeah, I was going to mention that you know what, even though our subcontracted governmental service providers declare emergencies all the time for that specific reason, it happens at the state level. It happens at your county level. It happens at your local level. And all you have to do is go in and look at some of the paperwork that you have in your towns, in your county. Everything they do and try to pass is by emergency.
Right.
And it's, what caught me at the jump when I started looking into that, when you start seeing that all the time, you're like, why in the hell is this an emergency? Why is that an emergency? And then you realize everything's an emergency. There's not one thing they try to pass that isn't an emergency.
Right. Well, what is that, Kyra? There's a lot more of us. It's just we're the only two that really get up here and speak. A lot of those other men and women, they prefer to be somewhat anonymous. Maybe it's for dramatic effect, or maybe it's just because, their particular counties aren't, I guess, to the place where ours are. I mean, we're just willing to do the work and educate. So,
hey, Kyra, if you ever want to think about becoming a sheriff, just let us know. We'll help you out.
Right. So basically, if we get back to, this bankruptcy law, the legal status allegedly allows maritime jurisdiction to override land law. So land law has been usurped, maritime's a usurpation. If the nation is a bankrupt vessel, the maritime law is the captain, and you're just cargo. So if maritime laws was never meant to govern the land, how did it end up ruling your life? Well, the answer, some say, lies in the paperwork. So let's follow the paper trail.
The paper trail. Where in the hell's the paper trail start? Well, I would say, we all know the first paper trail is your birth certificate.
Right.
Your birth certificate registers you as a corporate entity, not as a living person. The name, in all caps, represents a legal fiction. That's your straw man that everybody talks about. This entity is alleged to subject to maritime law. So from birth, you're in maritime law.
Right.
While the living being is presumed to consent. So they're creating a legal entity out of you in the maritime jurisdiction, but they're saying the little child, the baby, is consenting to this. That's something.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't born into freedom. You were registered like cargo, like Adam was saying, and cargo falls under admiralty law. And then when you got next on the paper trail, Social Security numbers. Applying for Social Security numbers is seen as entering into a commercial contract. And you know what? In my research here lately, I'm talking like earlier today and the past previous days, starting to seem like the Social Security has really gotten everybody hooked like a fish, got us all messed up in this jurisdictional shit. Well, you become a beneficiary of a trust managed by the state, subject to its rules. And it's not just a number, it's a tracking code for your corporate self. They keep track of you, they trade you, you're numbered. So, yeah, just the way it is.
Well, that takes us into, the Social Security being signed up for that unbeknownst to you because you're not at the age of majority to make that decision for yourself. So one of your parents act as the informant, not only on the birth certificate, but a lot of times they push that you fill that Social Security stuff out at the hospital. And, as you go on, the next thing you get to a point where you need to get around. So riding a bicycle is not going to do it for you. So you start wanting to do what? Drive. Well, driving is a commercial term. So you end up getting a driver's license and a state ID. A state ID doesn't have the same scrutiny that a driver's license does. You should be okay with that, but it still will keep you under certain acts. So basically when you claim these documents are contracts with the state, reinforcing your status as a resident under administrative law. So they get you that way because there's not proper disclosure on these documents. And, you can cross things out under contract law. Anything you don't like, they might not like it, might not want to accept it. But I'm just telling you, you can cross stuff out and write what you need to write that you accept. Anybody can do that. It could be your kids going to school. It could be going to the doctor's office. It could be, don't do all that digital crap because you're waiving your rights to be able to sue them if there's malpractice or they give somebody something that, like one of them jabs that causes myocarditis and all that type of stuff.
Bell's
Basically, you're waiving your rights. Bell palsy. You're waiving your rights, Unfortunately, You're waiving your rights. They're getting you. You don't know because you're not getting full disclosure. There's a lot of deceptive contract fraud going on constructively and intentionally.
Hey, Adam, real quick. Someone had a question on there about how can you have meeting of the minds when someone's in a different jurisdiction or a different, what the hell did they put?
When one's incorporated and
I was going to say we're not meeting with those minds. You're just staying in your unincorporated assembly that you're trying to get in everybody that wants to be an American again.
Well, that falls on other people. That doesn't just fall on us. I mean, there's other people in other positions. Like we have a state speaker, we have a justice, we have General Assembly, we have various other lines, of communication that can do noticing, or there could be jury nullification for all the statutes, acts, and codes. If they're trying to gig one of our Americans, it could be jury nullified. So, they don't talk about jury nullification at all on the statutory side. They want to keep those people as ignorant as possible. I've seen it. Some of them read, some of them do some research, but at the end of the day, there's some orders being given from the bench that shouldn't be being given, and screw all that.
Yeah.
So anyhow, you get into, where language matters. Terms like resident, license, these imply permission. They're not inherent rights. You're basically waiving your God-given unalienable rights and your inherent rights. When you contract, you're basically waiving all of that. Just something to think about. I believe that goes into filing taxes.
Yeah, I was going to say, as we're going down the line, this paper trail, we had the birth registration, Social Security, driver's license, and state IDs. And how about the tax filings? The IRS forms. Filling taxes under the IRS system affirms your status as a U.S. citizen. So as soon as you fill out them forms, you're already claiming that you're a U.S. citizen. A term allegedly tied to federal jurisdiction. In our position as U.S. citizens, our federal employees or dependents, they're not sovereign state nationals. There is a distinction there. There's a difference. When you file, you're not just paying, you're pledging allegiance to a system built on maritime rules. And when you do not follow those rules, they gig you. So we got...
Somebody said paper doesn't have a mind. Well, paper can state facts and assert facts on the record for the record. Let the record reflect, right? Let the record show that what you're saying is a undisputable fact
Yeah,
that needs to be entered in as evidence at some point.
exactly.
So, but yeah, so
The next one down the line would be the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. We talk about this a lot. I see a lot of videos online about it. Everybody giving their opinions and their due diligence. It's a lot of good stuff. It's a lot of comprehension. You know what I mean? There's so much stuff in there that the UCC governs commercial transactions and is used to enforce maritime principles on the land. And that's a weird part, but the UCC is the backbone of the corporate legal system
right.
that overlays the republic. We talk about that once in a while, how, we were talking about the Civil War after when the Reconstruction Acts were coming on. They take the country, they take the state, and it's overlaid by districts and overlaid by different things. And that's what the UCC is doing too.
Right. So somebody said the legal birth person is not a corporation, it's an individual. Well, an individual is a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen that's a taxpayer. That's what an individual is. So when you first are born, you're a living whatever progeny that could be, of female descent or...
Yeah, you're actually sovereign when you're born.
Right. At that point, you're at your most pure American form. And then after that, all the paperwork commercializes you from there. So you're not necessarily an individual at that point, but as soon as you start your first job and you start paying taxes, that's when that individuality kicks in. And I don't, again, this is against the basic laws of communication. When you say individuality, you're thinking me, singular, me, individually. Well, that's not what it means, as an individual.
Yeah, it's their language, legalese. It's the whole different language.
Right. So this is all presumed consent and silence, which is the same as acquiescence, which they consider as an admission of guilt. But here's the funny thing. If you send them something and they don't rebut it, that stands as a fact in commerce and a truth in commerce. So why would they proceed after that thinking they can just, come harass you after they acquiesced and admitted to guilt? And that becomes a tacit agreement. So if you put your order of what you want the outcome to be in there and you say you need to respond within 10 to 14 days or 30 days, or else this is a binding tacit agreement, and they don't rebut that point for point, why would they proceed? That's a crime at that point. They've acted in dishonor.
Dina of the Desert, read the Buck Act. I just read it a little bit ago for about the 10th time, but yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah, anybody who has like CPS in their hair or child support, the Buck Act is something they heavily rely on. It's one of those things where they claim that they have the authority to violate due process, do whatever they want, suspend licenses, issue warrants through information and not facts. Just, they're butthurt because you told them to kick rocks. So now the guy who's the case manager wants to go over and, talk with their buddy who's down the hall in the prosecutor's office. And, this guy just, we got to get him. He's just horrible. He told me to go F myself. And, well, I'm going to tell you that every time I see it because, you can't break the law to enforce the legal. That's asinine. But anyway.
Exactly.
If you claim you don't rebut the presumption of maritime jurisdiction, you're deemed to have consented. Like I said, you can challenge jurisdiction before, during, or after. If they don't like it, hey, that's too bad. I plead the fifth until you prove you have valid jurisdiction over my person or to bother me at all. There's legal maxims. Silence is acquiescence, right? They
Yeah.
don't follow maxims. They try to enforce them all the time, but if you do that to them, they just look the other way, like they're blind
Yeah.
all of a sudden. You can't talk to me like that. Well, I am, all the time. Every time, in fact, because that's my duty. That's every American's duty to stand in their square and assert their rights. They work for you. They are contracted to uphold certain things, and if they're not upholding that contract, then you have a right to
That's
impeach them.
You're spot on. That is what I think that's the number one thing that everybody forgets. These people, no matter who they are down in there in these courts, in the city buildings, they're our public servants. They're there to serve us. They're not there to tell us what to do. They're not there to tell us shit.
It's funny how
Other
over
than
160
hello.
years they think that they are in charge and control you and that they
Yeah.
own you. And it's the other way around. The people tell them what to do. We give them directives. They work
Yeah.
for
Somehow
you.
this got flip flopped and
Right.
freaking crazy.
Well, let us not forget, I mean, if you ask any question, you shouldn't be rushed through there in like a minute to 5 minutes. And, you don't even get a chance to speak or ask any questions. It's just boom, boom, boom. You know, just made another 2 mil for the private side of the ledgering. Screw that guy. And then they kick you out the door, and then, it just, cycle, rinse, repeat. That's what they do all day. I sat down there for a few hours and I watched, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 cases go before me. And my head was about to fall off my shoulders. I counted so many different violations. Like they don't even follow, federal rules of civil procedure. They don't. They don't follow anything that governs them. They just do what they want to do.
That's a rolling theme all across town, all across the county, man. Do whatever you want. Well, we're here for that specific reason to start holding
Whoa.
people accountable, to get
Yeah.
our country
So,
back on track, get our towns back on track, get everything unincorporated, and stop sucking off the freaking the service providers' tits,
yeah. Yeah, this is not in this system, not knowing the rules, this doesn't protect you. It binds you. Um, what is the saying that, you know, ignorance is not an excuse for a defense in law. That's not a defense. If you say, oh, well, I didn't know. Isn't that what they do? They've been doing it my whole life. Oh, well, I didn't know. Well, okay, then, we got some violations here. If you didn't know and you did it anyway.
Yeah, it works for me, but not for thee.
Right. And then you find out they've continually done it their whole career, even after that point. So they can't say they don't know at some point. That doesn't work. Plausible deniability doesn't work. You are liable and you are accountable.
Yeah,
That's
well, there are real world implications. We followed the paper trail. Well, let's talk a little bit about what it means in practice. If maritime law governs your life on land, how does it affect your rights, your property, and your freedom? Adam?
Well, court cases and jurisdictional challenge, say you brought a claim, many courts operate under administrative or maritime jurisdiction, not constitutional common law. So, indicators would be the gold fringe flag, absence of jury trials, use of codes and over statutes. Well, they use statutes, acts, codes, and ordinances, whatever they see fit, really. But the impact as a defendant or alleged defendant may be treated as a corporate entity, not as living men or women. So you walk into the court thinking you're protected by the Constitution, but the administrative law judge sees you as a vessel in commerce. So presumed consent and lack of disclosure, that's going to get you every time. So you might claim individuals are not informed, they're not being tried under. That doesn't really jive. Individuals are not informed, they're not being tried under maritime law. our agreement, this violates due process and informed consent. So I think that's kind of a little bit twisted around the way that that is worded, but I'll correct that and we'll come back to that. So if you don't know the rules, how can you play the game? If you don't know the jurisdiction, how can you defend yourself? This is where, you're going to get into, the various types of things, around property tax and stuff like that, So do you have any information on, I guess it would be like patents and stuff like that, dealing with the land?
Yeah, land patents and titles, that'd be down the list too. Titles are corporate instruments, and land patents are sovereign claims, so it's one of those things where it's, we separate things out, in our jurisdiction. Like I said, they use the titles. We use land patents. Americans must reclaim the land jurisdiction through proper recording of land patents. That's what we need. And, we're working on that as the assemblies. I don't know if anybody's really cracked the code yet, but I think people are getting close. It's a lot of research, and not to mention you got to get our service providers to heed to us, because somehow they think they're in charge, which is totally crazy.
Going back to the allodial title.
Yeah.
Figuring out your land track history and, working your way backwards, and eventually you'll run into something.
You don't own your land. You lease it from the corporate state. And that lease is governed by maritime law. There we go again, Everything's ending up with this maritime law being embedded onto the land and soil of this country, and it's screwing a lot of shit up. And we got foreclosures and eminent domain. We've talked about eminent domain before. That's just I don't even know what to say. How can you just take somebody's land because you need it? You know what I mean?
Theft.
That's basically
theft and murder, and what do you call that? Pillaging and
yeah. Well, we claim that property seizures often occur under commercial rules and not constitutional protections, just like, like I said, eminent domain. How homeowners may lose property without full due course, process. Due process. If your home is treated as collateral in a commercial system, then losing it is just business, not justice.
Right.
Which is totally, yeah.
Yep. And they step in after, so not only when you contracted, to get the mortgage, and that will mortgage fraud because they've never been the holder in due course. They never held the title. A lot of times they purchase that debt from whoever sells the home. And, here you come and, you sign this contract. And I know how I signed mine. I was under duress because that happened 3 different times. They kept selling. Well, none of them were the holder in due course. Yeah. So, we'll go back after that at some point in the future. But
it's crazy, though. Everything in this maritime jurisdiction is just leading to fraud. Everything. We talked about this last episode. Everything you've learned is a lie. And it really is. It just, everything is shit. Fraud, deception, corruption.
Well, so their version of neighborhood watch, there should be neighborhood militias, neighborhood militias that look out for one another, where neighbors protect their neighbors, neighbors take care of one another, because essentially if a collapse ever happened, you're going to want to have some type of mechanism in place, to hold your ground. People are going to start pillaging and, rioting and looting and doing all of the things. And you guys got to come together. It doesn't matter if they're elderly or if they're young or if they're from another country, because there's a lot of that over here. People just need to step up, and they need to start educating and start forming these groups. And I'm not saying do anything nefarious, just be prepared, because if that type of stuff ever did happen, you're going to want something like that in place, and you're going to kick yourselves in the ass if you don't have something in place, and you're going to wish you did. If it ever did happen. So,
have little neighborhood meetings, get a safety plan together.
Right. Yeah, I just nodded a couple people, I mean, they get it, they're from a similar background. And, one of the reasons why I moved to a particular area where I'm at is because of the geographical topography and just the layout, because I seen its advantages. So that's, people need to think strategically like that. And, if you see something, say something. If you see people coming from other neighborhoods that don't belong, sure, they can pass by. But if you notice them eyeballing something that they shouldn't be eyeballing, and that neighbor's on vacation or whatever,
Yeah,
speak up.
just be calm though. In the next few days, though, you're going to have a lot of little intruders coming around for candy.
Oh, yeah. Well, at that point, just throw it at them. Don't let them
Yeah,
come up to the house.
yeah.
I said, all right. Yeah, so this
Eric
takes us
Goodwin
into
coming at you.
Eric Goodman Butterfinger coming at you. Yeah, so this takes us into U.S. citizens versus American state nationals. So our claim is a U.S. citizen is a federal employee or dependent subject to maritime law. So the alternative to that would be to reclaim your status as an American state national, to restore land jurisdiction protections. Not just that, to reconstruct your lawful American governments to get involved. So you're not just misidentified, you're misclassified, and that classification determines which laws apply to you. So anything that would impact on a right and a freedom would be, claiming rights become privileges under maritime jurisdiction, which they do. All these rights are unlawfully converted into privileges, and then a lot of times you're charged to be able to exercise, say driving versus traveling. And then you got to pay for a registration fee. You got to pay for emissions testing. You got to pay for, whatever, da da da. So just be aware of that, that's an impact. And then another example would be licensing requirements, permits, administrative fines, and fees. So, in the sea-based system, you don't have rights, you have permissions, and those can be revoked at any time, which they do like to strip things from you all the time without giving you your fair day in court under equal protection of the law.
Yeah.
That's why I tell them to kick rocks.
Well, hey, PsyOps agent they've declared war. They want reactions, but be at peace. It freaks them out. You're spot on. That's why we fly the peace flag, and we know all about that. We're here for, we're peacekeepers. We ain't biting on their crap,
Right.
We're gonna do this peacefully and lawfully. We're gonna get it done. Sooner or later, things are gonna start turning a little better for the assemblies, and it's gonna turn from those different jurisdictions, and yeah, they're gonna be a little weirded out, I would imagine. I see Ohio Bell. Hey, Bell.
Hey, Bill. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, there's a lot of very good things in the comment section. A lot of people doing good research. I like seeing that.
Yeah, keep it up. Keep it up. And,
So,
share this stuff as much as possible. Share it with everybody. We got to get out the word. We got to get our assemblies growing. We need you just as much as you're going to need us.
so
You got
can I?
anything else, Adam?
Yeah, I was going to get into special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States. So, one, it's presumed that your body is a vessel under 18 U.S.C. 7 subsection 1. Then it's presumed that the automobile that you're traveling in is a vessel under subsection 2. It's presumed that the United States acquired the land where the United States is exercising its special maritime and territorial jurisdiction. So this was conveyed to the United States by the legislator of Colorado, or whichever state, any of these type of infractions occur on. So, we're on Ohio. That all comes from, the legislator's office who is putting this stuff into act. And, it's being enforced under whichever code that is. And if so, where is the enactment by the whichever state legislator that conveyed the land is mandated by Article Article 5, Section 3, you know?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of different things that they presume, that they have jurisdiction and authority over, and they don't. So I would highly recommend, whatever type of case anybody has or whatever speculative comes through their public use of Fruck's mailbox name that they benefit from, enjoying collecting all of that stuff and gracefully moving it inside where it doesn't get rained and snowed on. Do your research on whatever those types of things are that they're claiming, and, take your time rebutting it, in the next week after you get them, and send it back to them certified and send it back to them with a judicial notice. So, those are just some things to look into and think about. Give it to them certified, and have them served. Get a process server, a notary who offers those services. Make sure that they're going to get something, because a lot of times if you mail it, a lot of times that gets rejected or held in somebody's desk. They claim they didn't get it, but yet they're reading it to you over the phone, Dana.
Yeah.
And you have those type of situations happen. Whereas if you actually do it certified or registered, you do a return receipt. Now they got to sign for it. What happens if they sign for it and they claim they don't have it? Well, now you go to the Postmaster General and you file a complaint. Let them deal with it. Most of the time, they're not going to do anything, but it creates a paper trail.
Yep.
So,
all right. Well, sounds pretty good for today. Let's wrap her up. Just wanted to let everybody know, maybe check out ktfnews.org, see what they got going on over there, or claimyourinheritance.info. Over there they have some of these trifolds you can download, get them to your friends, neighbors, hand them out to people, start getting your assemblies a little bigger. And we also do have a Cash App here that's $APC 140. If anybody wants to donate, that would be great. If not, it's fine. Just ask for a little help. But just remember, it's not about you. It's about your children. It's about your community. It's about your country. The system only works if you stay asleep. So wake up, stand up, and speak up. Adam, thanks a lot for coming. Appreciate it.
No problem.
He's over there on Rumble on the Reeves Shop Talk. The Reeves Talk Shop 44 over on Rumble. Go and check that out. But thanks a lot, everybody, for showing up. We'll see you on the next one.
Take it easy.